And I remember one of them, who's actually a friend of mine, he's telling me that he's read in their books, and he told me this, I would say, about 12 years ago, 12 to 14 years ago. He said that he found in their books that they say that there's only one thing that can actually properly protect you from the negative effects of these things, and that's a verse that is found in the Muslim holy book, the Quran. And that verse is Ayatul Kursi, which is really, really interesting, right? It's Ayatul Kursi. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد وما كفر سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون الناس السحر صدق الله العظيم. What we want to speak about today is something which is a reality, and it's one of those realities which is very, very interesting for a lot of people, scary in some ways, and extremely disconcerting for many people. This is the issue of witchcraft, the issue of magic and spells and sorcery, and as I said, witchcraft. There's been a renewed interest. I mean, there's always been witchcraft throughout the various different cultures, not just in Islamic cultures, in Jewish culture, and in Christian culture, and various other cultures. And you would have probably assumed that when it comes to atheists or people without religion or secularists or agnostics, that there would be no interest in this. There would just be a denial of this aspect and a look of disdain and disbelief with regards to sorcery and witchcraft and magic. However, there's a number of articles that you can read from recent times, the last year or so, or probably a bit longer, where there's a lot of people in the West who don't consider themselves to be following any religion, and who actually look down upon these things, who are getting into witchcraft. They're getting into sorcery. They're engaging in occult practices. They're dabbling in it. They're experimenting with it. So why do they do that? And why are people doing that? So there's these articles that you can read about why people are doing this. And I think a lot of it comes from how we are made, how humans are made. Humans are made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we believe, to revere Allah. There's within every human being, there's an ability to believe in a God, to believe in a higher reality, a creator, a nourisher, a cherisher. That's built into every human being, because that had to be there for us to be able to believe and to be given the challenge from Allah to believe in. So even from a theological perspective, that has to be there. And what we can see is that where you have certain communities around the world, both historically and even probably nowadays, probably less so, you have a lot of communities and cultures and civilizations in which they did not know about Islam or Christianity or Judaism or any other kind of organized religion. You see that you get this idea that people want to believe in something greater than themselves. This is an inherent characteristics, an inherent need, you could say. There's an inherent need within every human being to look for something greater, to revere something, to admire something, to think of something as their cherisher, and so on and so forth. So you'll see in many primitive communities, in small villages, maybe across Africa or other places, and definitely historically in Asia and other places, you'll see that they will start to revere and respect and worship and give offerings to the biggest tree in town, the biggest tree in the village, the largest tree in the village. That will become their god. They'll ascribe some kind of divinity or a connection to some divinity to this place, to this large tree. Sometimes they take a mountain as their lord. Sometimes they'll take the great lake or the ocean as their lord. There's a big boulder or something, or a big animal or something like that. Usually people equate greatness obviously with large in size, large in proportion, or things of that nature, because everybody has this desire within them to look out for something and to revere something and respect something, regardless of who that person is. So you see that they do this. Now, there's some religions, of course, they consider that anything from which benefit is derived, that could be a god, that could have divinity of some sort. And that's why the cow is revered in many places. In fact, even the private parts, I mean, there's Lin Puja, I think that's what it's called. Even the private parts are revered in that sense and considered to have some kind of divinity in that sense. So that all comes down to this human desire to revere something. It's in everyone. Now, in the modern world, when people have given up what they would assume as the traditional classical gods, of the earlier centuries, Christianity, they've given up Christianity. Christianity has been pushed out of much of the European continent. They have relegated it to all religion, in fact, they've relegated it to a private practice. So leave it at the door when you come to work, when you go to school, when you go into the media, leave it at the door. They'll tolerate that much. They won't tolerate trying to bring it in. Of course, Muslims are having a hard trouble with this because we're not willing to leave our religion at the door, because Islam is totalizing. Islam governs every aspect of our life, including when we're at work and when we're at school. When the beckon and call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes, we have to respond and say, labbaik, and pray and say, Allahu Akbar. So that's where the whole turmoil is coming about. A lot of the places where you see that Muslims want to establish masjids, these were places, if you look at the map, and you should probably go to the Museum of London. If you've not been to the Museum of London in around the Barbican area, I think all Londoners should actually go there, because it's really interesting to know how this great city of London was actually founded as Londinium, as a small Roman garrison town on the banks of the River Thames, many hundreds of years ago, and then eventually developed. And as you see its development, as you go around the museum and you see its development, you actually see how when Christianity came in, and there were literally the way we see masjids in Muslim countries, where at the end of each large street, in each localized area, there'll be a musalla at least, if not a large jami, a large Jummah masjid as they call them, right? This is exactly how it was. That's why you see so many churches. I mean, the churches are just being sold, 50 or more a year are being sold and turned into multiple things. And then when Muslims want to establish a masjid somewhere, the council has big issues with that, because they just don't understand that Muslim needs to pray 5 times a day. This is an expression of their faith. This is adherence to their faith. This helps them. This keeps them grounded. It keeps them healthy. It keeps them spiritually nourished. And spiritually nourished people are better people, for the society. They just don't understand that, because religion is not important. Hopefully, and it does seem that things are opening up in that regard, right? So people have this desire. Now, in the modern world, when you don't have this, you could say that one of the biggest religions in the modern world is money. Money is the god now, is the new deity, is the new god. It's money. One of the recent awliya who just passed away, his statement was really, really, really profound. He said that it's a good job that Muslims have to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day, for those who pray 5 times a day, or those who go to the masjid every Friday, right? That they can then be reminded that you actually believe in Allah. Otherwise, even the Muslims, right, who consider themselves to be adherent to the religion and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even them have taken God as their divinity, for their divinity, for their God, for their object of worship. Because an object of worship is who you sacrifice yourself for, who you get up for early in the morning, right? Who you are willing to undertake many, many efforts and sacrifices and endeavors to do these things. And this is exactly what's happening with money today, right? There's a massive explosion of prosperity. It's just everywhere, and you can get it if you work hard, and you can get it. So it's a good job that we have to come and be reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it keeps us grounded. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Now, along with that, coming to our original discussion here, is that because people are looking for exploration, they have time, and there's an explosion of information, and through social media primarily, on TikTok you've got multiple videos on social media, on TikTok and other places, that show how to do witchcraft, that show you how to do sorcery, that tell you how to chant various different spells and beckon and invoke certain spirits. and otherworldly objects. This is what's going on. I mean, there's like a procedure that you can learn to do this. I'm not encouraging this, but this is what's happening. And no longer are the wizards and the witches of what used to see in classical times, or depictions of with pointed hats and spells and you can say broomsticks. These are very modern ideas. You know, these would be people that look absolutely normal, but they're entranced with these ideas, and they call onto these things, and sometimes they get possessed, or they have a relationship of some sort, and they make contracts with one another. I mean, in Islam, we know about this because magic is a reality. The verses I read at the beginning from Surah Al-Baqarah, speaking about Sulaiman alayhi salam, and you know the magic that was allowed to be on the earth, and then it was told that these are bad things. This is not allowed to be used. That's why in Islam we're not allowed to use magic. You know, in haram, and according to other scholars, it's even just absolute kufr and disbelief. So there's a renewed interest in this. There's many things, like for example the Ouija board. There's people who use the Ouija board to make contact with the devil, with the shaitan, and then they burn themselves. So literally this article was not written by a Muslim. It was written by, you know, just a mainstream writer. And essentially they were saying that one needs to be very careful, because they were relating stories of people who had been negatively affected and actually harmed because of this dabbling in the occult practices, right? I mean, you know, Harry Potter probably started all of this on at the beginning. Harry Potter started all of this off, but now it's just taken a resurgence because people have a lot of time, social media, easy access to these things, and people getting negatively affected. And then they just don't understand because they don't believe in exorcism or whatever. And then there's people who go crazy, right? And there's a lot of things happening like that. So the article was warning about these practices. One needs to be very careful about these practices. So why are we speaking about this today? Well, firstly, is to warn people that it might sound very innocent. It might sound like a bit of an adventure, a bit of an experience. Let me try these things or try that thing. But it's extremely dangerous, and we know this, and it's haram in our religion to dabble with this. To give you an idea, the way it works, I mean, the way we understand is that every magic that's done today is done through jinn. So what you do is you invoke a jinn, and the jinn makes you do them a favor, or they're going to do you a favor, so they make you do something. Now, of course, it's a non-Muslim jinn, it's a bad jinn, it's an evil jinn. So what they do is they will make you insult Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's been a number of, you can say, objects found in the homes of contemporary witches in the Muslim world, right, as well, where they'll find pieces of the Quran, like pages from the Quran and names of Allah, smeared with menstrual blood, for example, and filth, feces. That's what the jinn require people to do, to then do the favor that that has been asked of them. So a lot of people would go to such individuals who are connected to the jinn in that sense, who basically sold their faith, right? They don't have any faith anymore in that sense. That's why you can see it's pure kufr in most cases, pure kufr. And then they get some chants and spells from them, and then they cause problems in the community. So they say that every bit of magic happens through jinn, through a connection through a jinn, because it's the jinn that do the background work for you. Okay? So that's what we know about in the Muslim community. Now, what is in here for us? What we have to understand is that there's a number of people I know who have done a lot of research when it comes to witchcraft and the occult. And I remember one of them, who's actually a friend of mine, he's telling me that he's read in their books, and he told me this, I would say about 12 years ago, 12 to 14 years ago. He said that he found in their books that they say that there's only one thing that can actually properly protect you from the negative effects of these things, and that's a verse that is found in the Muslim holy book, the Quran. And that verse is Ayatul Kursi, which is really interesting, right? It's Ayatul Kursi. I remember hearing that from him there. I've not been able to find the book that he was referencing. However, recently, just a few months ago, there was this little video clip that went around of a Russian witch. It just looks like a casual, normal woman, right? And she's saying that when I try to do spells and it's a Muslim, I can't get through. There's a halo. There's almost like a halo around Muslims that I target. It's like almost like there's a light or a halo, a protective halo, like a protective shield of invincibility. All the dhikr that we do, it protects us from the shaitan and evil influences. If we pray on time, and especially if you want the best protection, is to read the du'as and Ayatul Kursi. Massive impact, extremely beneficial and protective. We've got that. That's why nobody should be afflicted if we do this. So there's a really interesting incident that took place once that I want to relate to you. It was 1999, and I'd gone to America for Taraweeh that year. I moved there the year after. But I went there and I stayed with this brother whose family were visiting his in-laws. So he was alone for Ramadan, and so he had space in his house, so they had organized for me to stay there with him. So we finished Taraweeh, came home, went to sleep, and I had the room on my own, and there was a lamp in there. There was a tall lamp in there. It was one of those touch lamps. You touch the base, you tap the base, and it comes on. You tap it again, it comes on a bit brighter, and then it has various settings, and you tap it again, then it goes off, right? So you have to kind of tap it. So there's no button. In the middle of the night, about 2 o'clock, suddenly it just comes on. And I wake up. I was like, who put the light on? Right? Who put the light on? Okay, I put it off and then went back to sleep. And the next day I tell the host, I tell him that, this is what happened last night. I just mentioned it, just thought I'll mention it. Now, there in the area that I was in California, I mean, the houses are made of wood, right? The frames are made of wood. They're not made of brick, so they do have a bit of movement, and there was a train track that used to go past it. It could have been just simply something like that, just something moved or whatever, right? Or malfunction of the lamp or whatever the case is, right? I'm not saying there was something. But then when I told this friend of mine, this is what he decided to him. He said, oh, you know what? That's my son's room, right? You're sleeping in my son's room, and my son saw the shaitan in that room. And I was like, yeah, Jazakallah, that's really, really, really comforting. Right? That's really comforting to know that, the shaitan has been seen in this room. I mean, the shaitan could be anywhere, to be honest. I mean, the shaitan could be anywhere. The only time the shaitan is away is when you make adhan or dhikr of Allah, or, in Arafah, he has to stay in the outskirts. I mean, the shaitan can be around. So that don't think that's kind of any unusual. I mean, it's just about him showing himself. So I was like, okay, that's really interesting. Now, what he proceeded to explain to me was extremely amazing. That's very empowering, and I think that's the crux of this matter that really highlights what we need to be doing, right? So he said that one day in the middle of the night, right, he suddenly hears his son calling him, Baba, 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 from the other room. So he quickly rushes over, and when he's at the door of the room, his son is sitting up in bed, and he's saying, Baba, I can see the shaitan. I can see the shaitan. So what would you do in that case? If your child calls you and you're by the door and your child is saying, I can see the shaitan, what would you do? I would assume that many people would probably go there and grab the child and say, oh, it's all right, don't worry, you're not really seeing anything, you just had a bad dream, or we'll try to kind of, just comfort the child like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But what this guy did was amazing, and it was extremely empowering. From the door, he said, from what I recall, he said, read Ayatul Kursi. Right? I mean, his children knew Ayatul Kursi because he taught them. And the kid just, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, la ta'khuduhu sinatun wa la nawm, lahu ma fi as-samawati wa ma fi al-ard. And as he's reading, he says, Baba, the shaitan is gone, he's gone. Now, just think about that how empowering that is. For you to experience something like this, and then to read Ayatul Kursi, and then the thing just fizzles away. That's amazing. Now imagine that child for the rest of his life, wherever he goes, he's never going to be scared again. I've got something with me. And you all have it, we all have it. But we just have not referenced it in that right way and used it in that right way. But that made me extremely confident afterwards, even more confident than I was. I mean, I knew the theology, behind it, that the jinn can't do anything to you. They're actually supposed to be scared of you. The only time that they can scare you is if you become vulnerable, show your vulnerability, express your vulnerability, and don't seek protection from Allah. Otherwise, Allah has protection. Ayatul Kursi is something in a famous hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, which I don't want to repeat today, but you probably know about it. When he was looking after the Baytul Mal, he was looking after the supplies of the national treasury, right, of the treasury of Medina Munawwara, and somebody came to steal something, and it was the shaitan, and then shaitan said that read this Ayatul Kursi. So there's a number of narrations about this. We know about this, that it is very protecting. Now, just as a side note here, why do children see things sometimes? Children at a very young age, when they're still infants and toddlers, before you can say their senses are fully developed, because the eye develops, the eye sees at a frequency. Right? That's why we can't see infrared rays. We can't see the heat in the room. Okay? We can see a reflection of the heat. If you look on a day when there's a slight amount of light coming in from the window and your radiator is on the opposite side, and you look at the wall, you could probably see the rising of the heat as a shadow only. But you can't see the heat unless it's smoke. Then you're seeing smoke. There's many other things, microwaves, that you cannot see. Okay? So, because our eyes don't work at that frequency. Our eyes work at a frequency where we can see one another. And the brain is processing this and it can't process other frequencies. That's why sometimes when you have special goggles, infrared goggles or whatever, you can see more things. Right? Because now you've just added another dimension. So when children are young, they say that their eyes may have not formed fully. That's why they may be able to see at other frequencies. Eventually by age they fully form and then they can't see them anymore. That's why sometimes you might say your child is seeing something, you can't see something. It doesn't happen too many times. But you do see that dogs can see things that we can't see, and that's why they sometimes howl and bark. Right? Because they're seeing jinn and we can't see them. That's a possibility. Sometimes a dog is barking and you don't know what he's barking at. Another example is that those who've dealt with dogs or deal with dogs, they have a whistle. It's called a dog whistle. When you want to call your dog, you whistle. Nobody else can hear. You yourself cannot hear any sound coming from that whistle. But it's functioning at another frequency which the dog can hear. Animals can hear at another frequency and see at another frequency. All right? So that's probably the explain a lot. You don't have to worry about it too much. You just have to pray on them. So this is what I'm going to propose and say. We need to teach our children how to protect themselves, and we need to protect ourselves. Very, very important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all the tools in our religion. He's given us all the tools. So this is what I would suggest. Ayatul Kursi, every morning and evening. Amazing, amazing protection you get from that. Right? Number 2. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Amazing protection through that as well. Morning and evening. Number 3, Surah Al-Fatiha. You add that to it. Number 4, you at least add 2 du'as, which we get in the hadith. Bismillahi alladhi la yadurru ma'asmihi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama'i wa huwa as-sami'ul alim. A'udhu, and that's the first one, which means in the name of in the name of Allah, with whose name nothing in the heavens or the earth can provide harm. That's what invoking Allah with that name, that nothing can harm. The other one is أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. I seek refuge in the complete words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from every evil He has created out there. And that's any evil. That doesn't have to be just jinn we're speaking about. So we read these du'as, and then you blow on yourself, blow on your children. When your children get old enough, we teach them these du'as and encourage them to read it morning and evening and show them that these are for protection. And inshallah, they'll remain protected. The other thing which is very, very important is to stay pure as much as possible. To stay on wudu and definitely ghusl. So if you are in a seminally defiled state, don't go out to work as far as you can help it. Take a shower as soon as possible. It's okay if you're in the house and you have to wait a few hours. That's understandable. But you don't want to delay this. Right? You don't want to delay this in the daytime and so on. Now, there is an issue when it comes to women, obviously, when they're in their monthly periods, then you know, that's a state of impurity there. you can still make these du'as. All the du'as that I mentioned, Ayatul Kursi, Fatiha, Qul Wallahu Ahad, Qul Rabbil Falaq, Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, all of these can be read even by women in a state of menstruation for protection, morning and evening. You are more vulnerable essentially when people are impure usually. So that's why you want to definitely fortify yourself. That's why it's been observed that people who are bewitched, who are under a sorcery or a spell, or we say that they have nazar lag gayi, bandish ho gayi. These are various words that are used, right? There's a number of effects that they don't like reading the Quran, especially not the verses of ruqya. I remember once in Jumu'ah, a few months ago, I recited the last verse of Surah Al-Baqarah in Jumu'ah. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله, until the end. And this brother came up to me afterwards. I know the brother, and he said, that was tough on me today. That was really, really tough. I felt very restless in my prayer when you're reading that, because he does have effect, and he's been going through ruqya. Because whatever is possessing us, whatever is possessing anybody, is going to protest against this, because that's a cure. So if you feel like that, you need to read more, right? Not give in to it. And it might become more intense, they say. The second thing that they don't like to do a lot of times is that they don't like to have a shower. They don't like to have a bath. Because it's an impurity. Magic is an impurity in that sense, and it likes impurity. So what it does is that it doesn't want you to have a shower. There's somebody I know about, very, very righteous person, and he used to, have a shower every 2 days or at least. When he was affected, his close people told me that it was tough to get him to have a shower at least once a week, because you're affected in this way. And I'm not saying that, this is a self-diagnosis, but, you can always do ruqya. You can always do ruqya. That's why you don't necessarily need to go and spend thousands of money running from one door to the next to try to find a cure. You can do this yourself. But the best thing is preemption. The best thing is preemption. And some of these people really take people for a ride, promising certain cures. There was a Moroccan brother. This is in many Muslim cultures. It's people know about this. That's why they reference it. In fact, magic is in every culture. It's just that when certain cultures don't know much about it, you just can't reference it. And you just don't know what's going on. Whereas when you do know about what's going on, some people just talk about it as though that is it. And every mental health issue is a magic issue. And that's not true. It could just be a mental health issue as well. So I always encourage a multi-pronged approach about these things. That do some ruqya, right? Pure Quranic ruqya. And read the manzil and so on, and that's extremely beneficial. There's no side effects of that. In fact, the side effects are wonderful, right? It can only benefit you. And also go and contact a healthcare professional, right? And because sometimes it could just be a chemical imbalance in the brain of some sort, right? It could be drug overuse. There's people I know who've been in drugs and now they're schizophrenics. They just have a problem. They issues, and it's not necessarily magic. It's just that they've just been harmed. They've been damaged. So don't leave everything on, at one door. This Moroccan brother, he told me that once this woman went to one of these people, and you can just tell how they literally make fun sometimes and do crazy things. He said that I can only do your ilaj and your therapy if you bring me an orphan mouse. You have to bring me an orphan mouse. Like, where'd you get an orphan mouse for? So this poor woman, she eventually finds a mouse colony, right, of mice, and then she figures out, I don't know how, she figures out who the mother and father of that mouse is, and she kills the mother and father, and essentially makes the mouse an orphan, and then goes and takes that. Allahu Akbar. To be honest, you can only be considered technically an orphan if you're not baligh yet. So how did he figure? I'm just messing around now. How did she figure out that the mouse was mature yet or not? Because it had to be immature. But it just goes to show that there's just really crazy stuff out there, and you have to be very, very careful. There's one thing I can tell you to do that number of people have been able to benefit from. It's a simple thing that you do. If you think you've got issues and you have some kind of evil eye on you, and it's very possible. It's very possible you can have evil. You can give evil eye to somebody innocently if you don't say MashaAllah and invoke Allah when you're praising something, admiring something. You can say that to your own children and give them the evil eye. Sometimes they just start acting out of character. Most of these du'as will work. In fact, one very powerful verse for that I found is the last verse of Surah Noon wal Qalam.
وَإِن يَكَادُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَيُزْلِقُونَكَ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ لَمَّا سَمِعُوا الذِّكْرَ وَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّهُ لَمَجْنُونَ وَمَا هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Amazing, amazing dua. You can just tell a difference in the character where the evil eye is finished. So sometimes you may get a new car, you may get a new handbag, you may get something new, or you just, mashallah, look very, Allah has given you some beauty or some other great, position or influence or whatever, and somebody gives you the evil eye, whether, with bad intent or with no bad intent, right? That's why it's important to keep reading this. And as I said, the other two things that I can tell you to do, which are very effective, is two things. Number one, after Maghrib, for 3 to 5 days after Maghrib, read the last 3 surahs of the Quran, which are Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq, Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas. The one I'm invoking here, the one I'm quoting, he says 83 times, but you can read it more than that, at least that amount. That's just by experience. They say that that's a very effective amount. Otherwise, you could definitely do more than that. So don't get OCD about that. And then you blow in some water. Now, you don't have to read them all yourself. It's 83 times for each of them, right? Each of the 3 surahs. You can sit with a few people in your house, in your family, and each one reads, 20 each or whatever it is, 18 each or however it is. And get to that number, blow in that water. All of you blow in that water. And then you just drink that water by the next day, Maghrib. And then you do it again. And then you do it again. And then, do it for another 2 days or something. Insha'Allah. We've had number of cases where, mashallah, the problems they were facing reduced or totally eliminated. Along with that, read Surah Al-Baqarah. Preferably finish it every 3 days. Preferably finish it every 3 days. Not that difficult, right? It's like 3/4 of a juz to finish it over 3 days. Otherwise, if that's too tough, takes you a long time, read 10 verses of it a day and keep finishing it like that. Insha'Allah, you'll be protected. You'll get your vigor, let you sleep better, inshallah, when all of these things, your concerns, if they're related to these aspects, they're fake concerns that have come about because of this, inshallah, they'll be removed. So we've got the protection. We just need to use it, and we just need to increase our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So get our children to start learning this and these things so that they can read it for themselves, and let them feel the power of Ayatul Kursi, the great throne verse, the great verse of the Kursi, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's great words. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection, to keep us pure, clean and protected, right? May Allah keep us protected and productive. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. The point of a lecture is to encourage people to act, to get further, an inspiration, an encouragement, persuasion. The next step is to actually start learning seriously, to read books, to take on a subject of Islam and to understand all the subjects of Islam, at least at their basic level, so that we can become more aware of what our deen wants from us. And that's why we started Rayyan courses, so that you can actually take organized lectures on demand whenever you have free time, especially, for example, the Islamic Essentials course that we have on there, the Islamic Essentials Certificate, which you take 20 short modules, and at the end of that, inshallah, you will have gotten the basics of most of the most important topics in Islam, and you'll feel a lot more confident. You don't have to leave lectures behind. You can continue to leave, to listen to lectures, but you need to have this more sustained study as well. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.